The man moved like water through the crowded streets of New Seoul. People stepped aside without knowing why. They felt a chill, looked up, but saw only a shadow passing by. This was Taewon Kim, known across 17 star systems simply as the Shadow. Taewon kept his face hidden beneath the high collar of his black coat. His eyes, dark and alert, scanned the busy night market. Neon lights reflected off puddles from the recent rain, painting the streets in electric blues and pinks. Flying cars hummed overhead, their lights cutting through the mist that hung in the air. He checked the time on his wrist device. The job was done. Another target eliminated. Another perfect kill with no witnesses and no evidence. His 15-year record remained unbroken. Taewon slipped into a narrow alley, away from the crowds. He pressed his back against the cold wall, and finally allowed himself to breathe deeply. His hands did not shake. They never did, not even after a kill. He was too well trained, too experienced for that. His communication device vibrated. A message appeared on the small screen. Payment. Complete. Below these words was a number, a very large number. Taewon closed his eyes. This was it. The final sum he needed. After 15 years of killing, of becoming the most feared assassin in the universe, he had finally earned enough. Jia, he whispered the name softly, tasting it on his lips like something precious and fragile. He hadn't spoken his daughter's name aloud in years, hadn't allowed himself that weakness. But now, with the final payment received, he could say it again. Jia, his daughter, the child he hadn't seen since she was 4 years old. Taewon pushed away from the wall and continued walking, his strides longer now, more purposeful. He moved through the lower levels of New Seoul, where smoke from street food stalls mixed with steam from underground pipes. The smell of spicy noodles and synthetic meat filled the air. His apartment was in a tall, anonymous building. Nothing about the plain exterior suggested that inside lived the universe's deadliest assassin. The security system recognized him, and the door slid open silently. Inside, the space was clean and minimal. No pictures on the walls, no personal items on display. Just functional furniture, high-end technology, and hidden compartments for his specialized weapons. Taewon removed his coat and hung it carefully. He went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and drank it slowly. The city lights sparkled through his window. From this height, New Seoul looked almost beautiful, not the corrupt, crime-filled metropolis he knew it to be. He sat at his desk and opened his secure computer system. His fingers moved quickly, accessing hidden accounts and encrypted messages he had planning to do now. Arrangements to make, bribes to pay. On the screen appeared a file he had not opened in years. With a slight hesitation, he touched the icon. A picture filled the screen, a small girl with round cheeks and bright eyes. Jia at 4 years old, the last time he had seen her. The last image he had of his daughter. She would be 15 now, a teenager. Would she remember him at all? Would she hate him for sending her away? Taewon swallowed hard, his throat suddenly tight. The image blurred slightly and he blinked rapidly. The universe's deadliest assassin did not cry, not even when alone. He began typing messages to his contacts. To the officials he had bribed at the mining colony on Proxima Centauri B. To the transport pilots who would ask no questions. To the security personnel who would look the other way. His daughter was coming home. As he worked, Taewon's mind drifted back to the past. To the economic collapse that had destroyed their lives. To his wife, Soo Min, dying in his arms from a disease they couldn't afford to treat. To the crushing debt that threatened to send both him and Jia to the labor camps. The Nebula Covenant had offered him a way out. They had recognized his military background, his exceptional skills. They had offered to spare his daughter the worst of the labor camps, to place her in the less dangerous mining colony instead. All he had to do was work for them. Kill for them. The first assassination had been difficult. The second, less so. By the third, Taewon had learned to shut down his emotions completely. By the 10th, he had earned his nickname, the Shadow. By the 50th, his reputation had spread across star systems. Now, after hundreds of perfect kills, Tae-wan was a legend. A ghost story told to scare crime lords and politicians alike. No security system could stop him. No bodyguard could detect him. If the shadow had been hired to kill you, you were already dead. The irony did not escape him. He had become a monster to save his daughter. Would she even want to know him once she learned the truth? Tae-wan shook his head. She would never learn the truth. He would quit the business, create new identities for both of them. Move to one of the peaceful outer colonies, start over. His computer chimed, a response from his contact at the mining colony. Jia would be released in 3 days. A transport was arranged for next week. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Tae-wan allowed himself a small smile. Just 3 more days, and then a week of travel. In 10 days, he would see his daughter again. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the vast city below. For 15 years, this view had meant nothing to him. The lights, the people, the entire universe had faded into background noise as he focused on one goal, earning enough to free Jia. Now, with that goal finally within reach, Tae-wan felt something strange stirring in his chest. A feeling he had not allowed himself in 15 years. Hope. His communication device vibrated again. Tae-wan checked it, expecting confirmation of the transport details. Instead, the message made his blood run cold. One last job. Non-negotiable. Details to follow. The message was signed with the symbol of the Nebula Covenant. His employers, the people who had made him into the shadow, the people who still controlled his daughter's fate. Tae-wan's hand tightened around the device. One last job, just when freedom was so close. He took a deep breath and steadied himself. One more kill. He could do one more. For Jia. The universe's deadliest assassin turned away from the window, his face once again a mask of cold determination. He had killed hundreds for his daughter. He could kill one more. What Tae-wan didn't know was that this final target would change everything. Tae-wan stood at the landing dock, watching the transport ship descend through the cloudy sky of New Seoul. His heart beat faster than it ever had before a kill. This moment, after 15 years of waiting, made him feel more nervous than any assassination. The spaceport bustled with activity. Workers moved cargo. Travelers hurried to their gates. Security drones floated above, scanning the crowds. Tae-wan had chosen public transport for Jia's arrival. It was safer this way. No one would expect the shadow to meet someone at a crowded spaceport. He wore plain clothes, a simple gray jacket and dark pants, nothing that would draw attention. His weapons were hidden, as always, but today he hoped he wouldn't need them. The transport ship landed with a soft hiss. Passengers began to file out, looking tired from their journey from Proxima Centauri b. Tae-wan scanned each face, searching for the daughter he hadn't seen in 15 years, and then she appeared. Jia was tall for 15, with short black hair that barely reached her shoulders. She wore the standard gray uniform of the mining colony. Her face was thin, her skin pale from years underground. But her eyes, they were her mother's eyes, dark and intelligent, taking in everything around her. Tae-wan almost didn't approach her. For a moment, he just watched his daughter. She looked nothing like the 4-year-old he remembered. That child was gone forever. In her place stood this serious young woman, carrying a small bag that probably contained everything she owned. He stepped forward. "Jia," he said, his voice softer than he intended. She turned to look at him, her face showing no emotion. Not happiness, not anger, nothing, just careful observation. The face of someone who had learned to hide their feelings to survive. "You're my father," she said. It wasn't a question. Tae-wan nodded. "Yes, I'm Tae-wan, your father." "I know your name," Jia replied. "They told me who was coming to get me." An awkward silence fell between them. Around them, happy reunions were taking place. Families hugging, friends laughing. But father and daughter stood apart, like strangers. Do you have more bags? Taewon asked. Jia lifted the small bag in her hand. This is everything. Those 3 words hit Taewon hard. 15 years in a mining colony, and all his daughter had was a single small bag. He had failed her in so many ways. Then let's go home, he said. They walked side by side through the spaceport, not touching. Taewon led her to a waiting car, one he had rented just for today. His own vehicles could be traced back to the shadow. He opened the door for her, but Jia looked at him with suspicion before getting in. As they flew through the city, Jia stared out the window at the towering buildings and endless lights of New Seoul. Taewon wondered what she was thinking. Did the city amaze her after years on a mining colony, or did she hate it already? Where have you been all these years? Jia finally asked, still looking out the window. Taewon had prepared for this question. I've been working in security, he said. It wasn't completely a lie. High-level protection services. The pay is good, but I had to work for years to earn enough to bring you home. Jia turned to look at him. Her eyes were cold. Security, she repeated, as if testing the word. And that took 15 years? The debt was very large, Taewon said. And the mining colony doesn't allow children to leave until their parents pay what they owe. I know about the debt, Jia said. They made sure we all knew why we were there. Silence fell again. Taewon wanted to tell her everything. About her mother's death. About the impossible choice he had faced. About how every day without her had been torture. But the words wouldn't come. The shadow had forgotten how to speak from the heart. The car landed on the platform outside Taewon's apartment building. When they entered his home, Jia looked around with wide eyes. After the crowded barracks of the mining colony, the spacious apartment must have seemed huge. This is yours, Taewon said, showing her to the spare room. He had prepared it carefully, buying new furniture, a soft bed, colorful blankets, things he thought a teenage girl might like. Now, seeing Jia's face, he realized he had no idea what his daughter would like or dislike. Jia placed her small bag on the bed. She ran her hand over the soft blanket, her face showing emotion for the first time, surprise at the simple comfort. The bathroom is through there, Taewon said, pointing. You can shower, I'll make some food. Jia nodded but didn't speak. Taewon left her alone, giving her space. In the kitchen, he prepared a simple meal. Rice, vegetables, some lab-grown meat. The best food credits could buy. Nothing like the nutrition bars they served at the mining colony. When Jia emerged from her room, she had showered and changed into the new clothes Taewon had left for her. Simple pants and a tunic in dark blue. They were slightly too big for her thin frame. They ate in silence. Jia ate slowly, carefully, savoring each bite. Taewon watched her when she wasn't looking. He searched for traces of the little girl. He remembered. Sometimes, in a certain movement or expression, he caught glimpses of his child. Why now? Jia asked suddenly, putting down her spoon. Why come for me now after 15 years? Taewon met her gaze. I always intended to bring you home. It just took this long to earn enough. And what happens now? Now we live here, together. You'll go to school, have a normal life. Jia laughed, a short, harsh sound with no joy in it. Normal? I don't even know what that is. You'll learn, Taewon said. I'll help you. Jia looked at him for a long moment. Do you know what they called me in the mines? The assassin's daughter. Even there, people knew what you really do. Taewon froze. His carefully constructed lie shattered in an instant. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Don't lie to me, Jia said. Not after 15 years. I deserve the truth. Before Taewon could respond, his communication device vibrated. The message displayed was simple. Target Hyunki Park, details attached, complete within 48 hours. Jia saw the change in her father's face. That's work, isn't it? Your security job? Taewon shut off the device. Yes, one last job. And then what? We pretend to be normal? Jia stood up. I'm tired. I'm going to sleep. She walked to her room and closed the door. Taewon sat alone. At the table, surrounded by the ruins of their first meal together, the reunion he had dreamed of for 15 years had gone nothing like he had imagined. His device vibrated again, more insistently. The Nebula Covenant didn't like to be kept waiting. One last job, and then he could focus on becoming a father. Again, if his daughter would give him the chance. What Taewon didn't know was that Jia had already decided to give him that chance. But first, she needed to know exactly who her father had become. Morning light filtered through the window blinds as Taewon sat at his desk, studying the details of his target. Hyun-Ki Park was a rising political figure who spoke out against the crime syndicates. He wanted more regulation, more police oversight. He wanted to break the power of groups like the Nebula Covenant. Taewon understood why they wanted Park dead. What troubled him was the timing. Why now, just when he had brought Jia home? The Nebula Covenant knew how important this time was to him. This felt like a test of his loyalty. He heard movement and looked up. Jia stood in the doorway of her room, watching him. Good morning, Taewon said. He quickly turned off his screen. Were you planning your next kill? Jia asked. Her voice was calm, as if she were asking about the weather. Taewon sighed. Jia, we need to talk about this. Yes, we do. She walked to the kitchen area and looked in the food storage unit. Do you have any real food? Not the fancy stuff from last night. Just normal food. Taewon stood and joined her in the kitchen. I can make breakfast. What would you like? In the mines, we had protein paste every morning. It tasted terrible but kept us going for hours. Jia leaned against the counter. What do normal people eat for breakfast? The question hit Taewon hard. His daughter didn't even know what a normal breakfast was. Eggs, he said. Rice. Sometimes soup. Here, I'll show you. As Taewon prepared a simple breakfast, Jia watched his hands. The same hands that had killed hundreds of people now cracked eggs into a pan. How many? She asked suddenly. How many what? How many people have you killed? Taewon's hands paused for a moment. Then he continued cooking. I don't keep count. Yes, you do, Jia said. Someone like you would know exactly how many. She was right, of course. Taewon knew the exact number, every face, every name. He remembered them all, not out of guilt or regret, but because that was the kind of precise, detailed mind that made him the shadow. 312, he said quietly. Jia nodded, as if confirming something she already knew. All for money? All for you, Taewon corrected. He placed a plate of food in front of her. Every credit went toward paying off our debt and bringing you home. Jia picked up her chopsticks and took a small bite. Her eyes widened slightly at the taste of real eggs. You could have found other work, she said after swallowing. Not that paid enough. Not with our debt. Taewon sat across from her with his own plate. After your mother died, we owed so much to the medical system. Then the economic collapse hit. The Nebula Covenant offered a way out. By turning you into a killer. By keeping you safe, Taewon countered. The alternative was both of us in labor camps where neither of us would have survived. At least the mining colony gave you a chance. They ate in silence for a while. Taewon watched Jia enjoy the simple meal. It was the most relaxed he had seen her since her arrival. This target, Jia finally said. Who is it? Taewon hesitated. That's not something you need to worry about. I've spent 15 years in a mining colony because of what you do. I think I've earned the right to know. She had a point. Taewon took a deep breath. His name is Hyun-Ki Park, a politician who wants to stop the crime syndicates. So he's a good person, Jia said. And you're going to kill him anyway. It's my last job. After this, we're free. We can leave New Seoul, go to one of the outer colonies, start over. Jia put down her chopsticks. You really believe they'll let you go? The famous shadow just retires and disappears? The question hung in the air between them. Taewon had asked himself the same thing many times. The Nebula Covenant didn't let valuable assets walk away. But he had planned for that, had saved enough for new identities, for passage to places beyond their reach. "I've made arrangements," he said simply. Jia studied his face. "When do you have to do it?" "I have 48 hours. I'll start my preparations today." "Can I go out while you're working, see the city?" Taewon frowned. "It's not safe. The Nebula Covenant has eyes everywhere. So I'm still a prisoner, just in a nicer cage. Just for a few more days," Taewon promised. "Then we'll be free to go wherever we want." Jia looked out the window at the vast city below. "I've spent my whole life dreaming of open skies, and now I'm still trapped inside." Her words made Taewon's heart ache. "I'll take you anywhere you want to go, once this is done." "I'll hold you to that." Jia stood up. "I'm going to rest. The gravity here feels strange after Proxima Centauri." Taewon watched her return to her room, closing the door behind her. Then he turned back to his preparations. This kill needed to be perfect, his last masterpiece as the Shadow. For hours, he studied Park's schedule, his security detail, the layout of his home and office. Taewon was so focused that he didn't notice Jia had left her room until he heard a noise from his weapons room. The secured door was open. Jia stood inside, holding one of his specialized blades, examining it with curious eyes. "You shouldn't be in here," Taewon said, keeping his voice calm despite his alarm. "The security was good," Jia said, not looking up from the blade. "But in the mines we learned to break into the supply rooms or go hungry. Lock-picking became a survival skill." She turned the blade, watching light reflect off its perfect edge. "This is beautiful work. Custom made?" Taewon nodded, surprised by her calm handling of the weapon. "How did you find this room?" "Your apartment has a strange layout. There was space missing between rooms." Jia placed the blade back carefully. "I wanted to see what you were hiding." She looked around at the arsenal, blades of various sizes, projectile weapons, devices whose purpose wasn't immediately obvious, all organized perfectly, maintained meticulously. "This is who you are," she said. "Not a question." "This is what I became to save you," Taewon corrected. "Not who I am." Jia met his eyes. "Can you really stop? After 312 kills?" "Yes," Taewon said without hesitation. "For you I can stop." Jia studied his face, searching for truth or lies. Then she nodded once. "I hope so." She walked past him out of the weapons room. "Because I don't want to be the daughter of the Shadow. I want to be the daughter of Taewon Kim." She returned to her room, leaving Taewon standing among his weapons, feeling more exposed than he ever had before. His daughter had seen through all his defenses, all his walls, straight to the truth he had tried to hide. The next day, Taewon prepared for his final kill. Each movement was practiced, precise. He cleaned his weapons. He studied the target's routine one last time. When evening came, he dressed in the dark clothing of the Shadow. As he prepared to leave, Jia appeared in the living room. "You're going to do it tonight," she said. Taewon nodded. "I'll be back before morning. Will you tell me when it's done?" "If you want me to." Jia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Come back safe." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. But it was concern for his safety. After 15 years apart, it was more than Taewon had dared hope for. "I will," he promised. The Shadow slipped out into the night of New Seoul, unaware that this mission would be unlike any of the 312 that came before it. Taewon moved silently across the rooftops of the wealthy district. The night was clear, stars visible even through New Seoul's light pollution. His target, Yunki Park, lived in a large house with gardens and security systems that would stop most assassins, but not the Shadow. He had studied the security protocols, had mapped the patrol routes of the guards, had identified the blind spots in the camera network. Now he slipped through those gaps like a ghost, leaving no trace of his passage. This was What he did best, this perfect silent hunt. 312 times before he had completed missions just like this one without error. Tonight would be number 313, his final kill. Taewon reached the wall surrounding Park's home. He used a small device to scan for sensors, then carefully placed disruptors at precise points. The security system continued to report that everything was normal, even as the shadow slipped over the wall. Landing in soft grass, Taewon crouched low. The garden was large and well-maintained. Trees and bushes provided cover as he made his way toward the house. His dark clothing blended with the shadows. His footsteps made no sound on the ground. According to his information, Park would be in his study at this hour, working late, as he often did. The room had large windows overlooking the garden, easy access for someone with Taewon's skills. He was halfway across the garden when he heard the laughter. Taewon froze in place. This wasn't right. Park should be alone in his study. The laughter came from further in the garden, near a small pond that Taewon had noted in his preparations. Curious and cautious, the shadow changed his route. He moved toward the sound, staying hidden among the plants. What he saw made him stop and stare. Yun-Ki Park sat on a bench by the pond. But he wasn't alone. Two young children, a boy and a girl, sat with him. The boy was maybe 7, the girl a bit younger. They were laughing at something Park had said. The politician's face was lit with a smile as he pointed at the fish swimming in the pond. Taewon had studied everything about his target, his schedule, his security, his habits. He knew that Park was married, but nowhere in his information was there any mention of children. As he watched, Park picked up the little girl and set her on his shoulders. She squealed with delight, her small hands grabbing her father's hair for balance. The boy tugged at Park's sleeve, asking for his turn. They looked happy. Normal. A father playing with his children in the garden after a long day of work. Something twisted in Taewon's chest. A feeling he had buried long ago rose to the surface. For the first time in 15 years, the shadow hesitated. In his mind, he saw Jia at 4 years old, asking to be lifted onto his shoulders. Remembered her small hands grabbing his hair, just like Park's daughter was doing now. Remembered her laughter, the sound he had sacrificed everything to hear again. Park was saying something to his children, his face serious now. The little girl patted his cheek, as if trying to bring back his smile. The gesture was so innocent, so pure, that Taewon felt something break inside him. If he killed Park, these children would grow up without a father, just like Jia had. They would wait for him to come home, not knowing he never would. Would they be sent away? Would they end up in places like the mining colony? For 312 kills, Taewon had never allowed himself to think about such things. He had shut down his emotions, becoming the perfect tool for the Nebula Covenant. But now, watching another father with his children, he couldn't push away the thought of what his death would mean. Taewon's hand moved to his weapon, then stopped. For the first time ever, the shadow doubted. That moment of doubt cost him everything. Guard appeared on the path earlier than scheduled. He spotted something moving in the shadows. Taewon, distracted by the scene before him, had shifted position without his usual care. Security breach in the garden, the guard shouted into his communication device. Lights flared to life across the grounds. Alarms began to sound. Park grabbed his children, pulling them close as more guards rushed toward the garden. Taewon cursed his carelessness. He had allowed emotion to cloud his judgment. Now he had seconds to make a decision. He could still complete the mission. Park was right there, exposed. One quick strike and it would be done, even if he had to fight his way out afterward. But those children would see it happen. They would watch their father die before their eyes. Taewon made his choice. He turned and ran. Guards fired at the shadow moving through the garden. Security drones descended from above, scanning for the intruder. Taewon dodged the shots, avoided the sensors, and made it back to the wall. A laser blast grazed his side. As he vaulted over, pain flaring hot against his ribs, he didn't stop. The shadow raced across rooftops, through alleys, using every trick he knew to lose his pursuers. Only when he was certain no one was following did he pause to check his wound. The laser had burned through his clothing and left a deep, painful gash along his side. Not life-threatening, but serious enough. Blood soaked his dark clothes, making them stick to his skin. Taiwan leaned against a wall in a dark alley, breathing hard. The pain was intense, but that wasn't what troubled him. He had failed. For the first time in his career, the shadow had failed to eliminate a target. The Nebula Covenant would not be forgiving. They would know by now. Their spies were everywhere. They would know that Park was still alive, that the shadow had hesitated. And run, he needed to get home, needed to get to Jia. They had to leave New Seoul immediately before the Covenant came for them both. The journey back to his apartment was slow and painful. The wound in his side burned with every movement. By the time he reached his building, Taewon was lightheaded from blood loss. He entered his apartment through a hidden entrance, not wanting to be seen in the main hall with his injury. The lights were dim inside. Jia must be sleeping. Jia, he called softly. We need to leave. Now. No answer came from her room. Taewon moved toward it, one hand pressed against his wounded side. Jia, wake up. We're in danger. He pushed. Open her door. The room was empty, the bed untouched. Fear shot through Taewon, stronger than the pain of his wound. Had the Covenant already come for her? Had they taken her while he was gone? Then he saw the note on the bed. Simple words in Jia's handwriting. I followed you. I had to see for myself. Taewon's blood went cold. Jia had followed him to Park's house, had seen his failure. Was she captured? Lost in the city? Or was she on her way back right now? Staggered to the living room, leaving drops of blood on the floor. He needed to treat his wound, then find his daughter. His mind raced with possibilities, each worse than the last. The door to the apartment slid open. Taewon spun around, weapon in hand, ready to face whoever entered. It was Jia. She stood in the doorway, staring at her wounded father with wide eyes. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Jia rushed forward. You're hurt, she said, her voice tight with worry. You followed me, Taewon replied, lowering his weapon. Why? I told you. I had to see for myself. Jia helped him to the couch, her movements careful but confident. I saw everything. I saw you stop when you saw his children. Taewon sat heavily on the couch, the pain making it hard to think. You could have been caught. Or worse. I learned to stay hidden in the mines, Jia said. She was examining his wound now, her face serious. Where's your medical kit? Taewon pointed to a cabinet. Jia retrieved the kit and returned to his side. With skilled hands, she began to clean and treat the laser burn. You've done this before, Taewon observed. Mining accidents were common. Jia said simply. We all learned basic medical care. As she worked, Taewon watched his daughter's face. There was something different in her expression now. Something had changed. I failed, he said quietly. The Nebula Covenant will come for us both. Jia's hands paused for a moment, then continued their work. You didn't fail, she said. You chose. You saw those children and chose not to make them like me. Taewon had no answer to that. The pain and blood loss were making it hard to stay focused, but one thing was clear. They needed to leave before the Covenant found them. We have to go, he said. As soon as you finish, I have escape. Plans ready? Jia nodded. I know. Rest now, father. I'll help you. It was the first time she had called him father. Dawn was breaking over New Seoul when the first warning came. A silent alert on Taewon's security system showed movement in the building's lower levels. People coming up the emergency stairs instead of the main elevator. Moving quietly, but with purpose. They're here, Taewon said, rising from the couch where he had rested after Jia treated his wound. The pain in his side was still sharp, but he could move now. Could fight if needed. Jia looked up from the bag she was packing. After calling him father, she had helped prepare for their escape. Food, medical supplies, and some of Taiwan's emergency credits were already packed. How many? She asked, her voice steady. too steady for a 15-year-old who had never faced killers before. Taewon checked the security feed. 8 that I can see, probably more coming from other directions. He moved to his weapons room, Jia following close behind. We need to leave now, there's a hidden exit on the roof. Will we make it before they get here? Taewon didn't answer immediately. He was calculating times and distances in his head. The Nebula Covenant had sent professionals, people almost as good as the Shadow himself. They were moving fast. No, he finally said. We won't make it. He turned to face his daughter. I'll hold them off. You take the roof exit. There's a small ship docked there. The controls are simple. The coordinates for our safe location are already programmed in. Jia shook her head. I'm not leaving you. You have to. Taewon handed her a small device. This will unlock the ship. It will also unlock an account with enough credits to start a new life. No. Jia pushed the device back at him. We go, together or not at all. Taewon looked at his daughter's determined face and saw himself there. The same stubborn will that had kept him going for 15 years. He had missed so much of her life, but some things, it seemed, were in the blood. Together then, he agreed. But stay behind me. Do exactly as I say. Jia nodded. Taewon selected weapons from his collection. A blade for himself. A small defensive weapon for Jia, something simple she could use if necessary. Ever used? One of these? He asked, showing her how to hold it. No, but I learned fast. The security alert chimed again. The intruders were closer now, just a few floors below. Taewon led Jia out of the weapons room and toward the hidden passage that would take them to the roof. They had almost reached it when the main door to the apartment exploded inward. Smoke filled the room as armed figures rushed in. Taewon pushed Jia behind a wall, then moved with the speed and precision that had made him legendary. The Shadow came alive one last time. The first 2 intruders fell before they even saw him. The third managed to fire a shot that missed Taewon's head by centimeters. He didn't miss his strike to the man's throat. More attackers poured in. Taewon was outnumbered but fighting in his own territory. He knew every corner, every piece of furniture. Used everything to his advantage as he cut through his former employer's killers. But he was injured. Each movement pulled at the wound in his side. Each dodge was a little slower than it should have been. One attacker got close enough to slash at him with a vibroblade, opening a new cut across his arm. Taewon spun and struck back, dropping another attacker. But 2 more had circled around. They were trying to reach the area where Jia was hidden. No! Taewon shouted, throwing himself toward them. He took down one, but the other slipped past, heading straight for Jia. What happened next shocked even the Shadow. Jia stepped out from behind the wall, the small weapon in her hand. She fired twice, precise shots that dropped the attacker in his tracks. Her face showed no fear, only fierce determination. Taewon had no time to process what he'd seen. More attackers were coming. He fought his way back to Jia, bleeding from several wounds now. The passage, he gasped. Go now. Together they reached the hidden door. It slid open, revealing a narrow corridor that led upward. Jia went first, Taewon following, leaving a trail of blood on the floor. They had almost reached the roof when the final attacker caught up to them. A large man with cold eyes and a scar across his face. Taewon recognized him as one of the Nebula Covenant's elite enforcers. The Shadow, the man said, raising a high-powered laser pistol. You should have completed your mission. Taewon pushed, Jia behind him. Run to the ship, he whispered. Don't look back. But Jia didn't run. She stood beside her father, the small weapon still clutched in her hand. The enforcer smiled. Is this why you failed? Your little girl? The Covenant was surprised. The great Shadow undone by sentiment. Not sentiment, Taewon replied. Humanity. The enforcer laughed. Humanity is weakness in our business. He aimed his weapon at Jia. And weakness must be eliminated. Taewon moved faster than he ever had before. Not the calculated precision of the Shadow, but the desperate speed of a father protecting his child. He threw himself forward as the enforcer fired. The laser blast hit Tae-Wan squarely in the chest. He felt the burning pain spread through him, knew immediately that the wound was fatal, but his momentum carried him into the Enforcer, his blade finding its mark one last time. Both men fell. The Enforcer was dead before he hit the ground, Tae-Wan's blade buried in his heart. Tae-Wan collapsed next to him, blood spreading across. "The floor! Father!" Jia rushed to his side, dropping to her knees beside him. "No! No! No!" Tae-Wan tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. He could feel his life draining away with each heartbeat. Not even the shadow could survive such a wound. "The ship," he managed to say. "Go. Safe coordinates." Jia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Not without you. I just found you. I can't lose you now." Tae-Wan reached up with a shaking hand and touched her cheek. This close to death, memories flooded back. Jia as a baby. Her first steps, her first words, her laughter. All the moments he had forced himself to forget during his years as the shadow. Jia reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn and faded with age. With trembling hands, she opened it and held it where Tae-Wan could see. It was a child's drawing, simple lines forming a man's face with a big, bright smile. Above it, in uneven letters, were the words, "Dad's smile." "I drew this the day before you left," Jia said through her tears. "I kept it all these years. It was the only thing I had of you. I always wondered if you'd ever smile like this again." Tae-Wan stared at the drawing. A lump formed in his throat that had nothing to do with his wounds. For 15 years he had been the shadow, had killed without remorse, had shut down every emotion, had forgotten how to smile. But looking at his daughter's drawing, at the pure love of a child who had waited 15 years for her father, Tae-Wan felt something break inside him. Tears welled in his eyes and rolled down his cheeks. The universe's deadliest assassin was crying. With the last of his strength, Tae-Wan smiled at his daughter. Not the cold, empty smile of the shadow, but the warm, loving smile of a father. The same smile from the drawing. "I love you, Jia," he whispered. "I always have." Jia held his hand tightly as the light faded from his eyes. "I love you too, Father." The shadow died with those words in his ears. Not alone in the darkness, but with his daughter beside him. Not as a killer, but as a father. In the days that followed, Jia used the ship and the resources her father had prepared. She found the safe location, a small colony far from the reach of the Nebula Covenant. She also found the evidence her father had collected over years. Information that, when anonymously delivered to the authorities, helped bring down the crime syndicate that had enslaved them both. In her new home, Jia kept the drawing framed on her wall. The child's image of her father's smile. Not the shadow, but Tae-Wan Kim, the man who had sacrificed everything for her. The deadliest assassin in the universe who had, in his final moments, remembered how to be human. And when she looked at the stars at night, Jia smiled her father's smile.